Morning, America. It's the 22nd of December. The sun is already up. Yeah, I'm late to work, I guess, huh? Don't hold it against me. Be sure to like this video. It will only take you a second right now. Subscribe would be nice. Commenting would be just wonderful. Yeah, especially if you can correct me on scripture, because I'm open to it. I really am. Share this thing. Get it out there. Today we're going to cover my strategic intervention to recover this republic that we once had. You may ask, well, when did we lose it? We lost it gradually over time. And Abraham Lincoln was known as Honest Abe. And as you know, that quite often we give people nicknames that really are the opposite of what they are. Like, I mean, my dad had a fellow he used to fish with nicknamed Tiny Thompson. I think Tiny Thompson was like 6.5 feet tall or something. He was a big man, great guy, incredibly good hunter, very ethical, incredible builder of custom homes. He was a big man. We called him Tiny. We called Honest Abe honest because he wasn't exactly honest. You see, Abraham Lincoln knew that he wasn't supposed to hold that office. The original 13th Amendment barred him. That's the right word. Banned, okay, fine. Him from holding the office of the presidency. Not only that, it stripped him of any and all citizenship in these states. That's right. The purpose of the original 13th Amendment was not to negate titles of nobility like is written all over the internet. It's better entitled The Separation of Powers. And we needed a separation of powers because the errant attorneys got us into the War of 1812. Yeah, they caused that war. They got us into it. And what the 13th Amendment did is it stripped all Bar Association members, and let's get that right, British accreditation. We can say registry or regency. I like the idea of regency because it really points to the fact that it was through the Bar Association that the King of England kept control over his colonies. They still own this to a large extent. Go ask George Bush Jr. He even said so to the doggone Queen himself when she was alive. No, they never let us go. They've been meddling the entire time. And in case you're wondering, we will be going after Great Britain in a large extent. We have to. The legislative notes, the handwritten notes from the Virginia State Legislature that certified the vote, voting in favor of the original 13th Amendment, those are under lock and key in Great Britain, according to Eustace Mullins. Mullins was a great researcher, and the reason he was such a good researcher is because he actually had a bed in the library in Washington, D.C., in the basement. He spent so much time. He was getting books into the library, and a lot of those books never made it to the shelf. I don't think that was his doing. I think that was other people's doing. But he got to read books that you and I don't even know exist. I call this my strategic intervention because it is strategic, and it is the biggest major intervention we can pull. Now, I've got a dear friend, who keeps reminding me that we need honest money, and that's more important than restoring the republic. And I think we really are going to have to do it all at one time. When we come apart, we're not going to be able to agree upon what style of government to have, but we don't have to agree on anything except going by the original Constitution and doing it the way the founders started the whole thing off as. Now, there's a few holes in my ability to figure this out. I'll admit it. I don't know what to do about the party system that George Washington warned us about, which has defeated us, which has destroyed us, which has put us in the hands of our enemies. And that's not Russia, boys and girls. That's the Tricoms, okay? They own this country. They bought it lock, stock, and barrel. And I like that idea of locks. Yeah. They bought it. We've had nothing but traitors for presidents for decades. There wasn't a good one during my life. Even Kennedy had problems. And when Eisenhower went out of office, he gave a great speech and warned against what he coined, his term, the military-industrial complex. Now, let's get this straight. Let's name it what it really is. It is a medical military-industrial complex. Medical military-industrial complex. Does that give you a new perspective? I pray to God it does. Now, according to Eustace Mullins, that's where this came from. I'm going to give him credit. He said that the original 13th Amendment was ratified and that the ballot that was cast that finally made it the law of the land was cast by the state of Virginia. However, those notes are lost and under lock and key in Great Britain. What are they doing with our property? It's not very nice of them. However, about a decade ago, they were cleaning out the capital of New Hampshire in Concord. And they come across an old original copy of the Constitution. And it had the 13th Amendment written in it. So we have more evidence that it was fully ratified and adopted. And that was in 1812. It was that much of an emergency measure. And in case you're wondering what it held, was that no member of the Bar Association had any citizenship in these states whatsoever. Secondly, it held that no attorney, as an officer of the judiciary, as an officer of the court, could cross over and hold power, hold a seat in the executive branch or in the legislative branches. In other words, strict separation of powers. That meant you couldn't take an attorney and elect him to the presidency. You couldn't make him vice president. You also couldn't elect one to Congress or to the Senate. We need to revive the original 13th Amendment. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say, oh my God, Dr. Kent wants slavery. No. Nobody's going to ratify slavery, or nobody's going to pass slavery. And that's what Lincoln did, is he hid the fact that he was illegally in office by overriding the original 13th Amendment. But that's not when we got into trouble. We got into trouble in 1813, the immediate year following the ratification of the original 13th Amendment for the separation of powers. And that on March 4th, or was it the 3rd, of 1813, I think it was the 4th, when they sat the new Congress, they sat the attorneys. They did that in violation of the 13th Amendment. They just ignored it. That's where we went wrong, in my opinion. You might have another date, another event. Put it down in the comments. There have been a lot of problems since then, but my take on it is that we returned to the original 13th Amendment and we kicked the attorneys out of office in the executive branch of government and in the legislative branch of government. Certainly, legislators could employ attorneys, to do the technical expertise to help them with the legislation, but they can't hold the seats. Eustace Mullins also suggested, and I think he's absolutely correct, that the 14th and 15th Amendments are illegal. Why? Because the South did not have representation when those were ratified. The South was not allowed to vote. They didn't have any senators or congressmen that they elected. They were appointed by the North. Therefore, they're null and void. Now, as far as the 16th Amendment and the rest of the amendments, the argument can be made and should be made, this is what I hold to, is they are null and void because they are all out of order. So we wipe that slate clean. Okay, your 16th Amendment is gone. That's your income tax. By the way, according to an attorney named Stamper, who wrote a book called Fruit from a Poisonous Tree, which you'll notice it's got a nice bright blue cover on it. That's because blue is the color of poison in nature, and that's why you used to have blue uniforms on the police officers. It's an old tradition that came down from the blue toga of the officers in Rome. And basically it meant if you screwed with those guys, it was going to cost you. And so you saw a fellow dressed in blue, you knew he was representing the state, he was an officer, and you knew darn well that you needed to not mess with him. Because if you did, you were going to have trouble. Now, today, I think the police have screwed up. They've gone with black uniforms, or they'll call it dark, dark, dark blue. I don't give a shit. If you want to have your blue protection, then wear blue. If you want there to be a thin blue line, well, thicken it up and wear bright blue. Wear that bright blue that signifies poison in nature. You know, there's a butterfly with that proper blue on it. But you need to get away from black of the evil empire. Okay? Your income tax goes away. And your 17th Amendment for the direct election of senators, which is unconstitutional as hell, that goes away too. And all the others go away. And I know, women's right to vote. Who the hell is going to take that away from you? Well, I'll tell you who's going to take it away from you, if anybody. It's going to be your states. It's up to the individual states. When that amendment went through, it federalized elections. It violated the Constitution. It violated the state's authority, the state's rights. And so we need to return to that. And if your state says, well, you can't vote unless you own property and pay taxes, then so be it. You can't vote unless you're 5'6" tall, then so be it. You can't vote unless you're married, then so be it. Or the only person can vote would be head of household, married, and you can even say your wife has to be alive. You can say whatever you want, but it's up to individual states to determine that. You say you want diversity? Let's have diversity. Let's let the states take that again. There might even be a state that says you got to be a woman to vote. Who the hell knows? Okay, just be open-minded. Now, you also get rid of the limit of 3 terms, 2 terms on the presidency, I should say. I think the South had that right. The South actually kept our Constitution when they seceded, and they actually improved it in several ways. One was that they limited the number of people a congressman could represent, so it was always proportionate. And they actually, the Virginia was pretty smart. Whenever they got too big, they insisted on another state being formed so it could be represented properly. But more important than that is the Senate. The Senate represented the state governments. The states were the parties of the Constitution. And when you no longer have the parties of the Constitution being represented, you violated the Constitution. Therefore, the senators that represent state governments need to be selected and elected by the state legislatures among themselves. In other words, you will elect your congressmen and senators to your state government, and they in turn will argue among themselves and vote, and they will select 2 of them to go and represent the state government in Washington, D.C. And should that senator ever vote in a way should the senator ever do anything, the state legislature can fire them on the spot, can recall them. They'll be forced to leave D.C. and they'll return back to the seat to which they had been elected. So you didn't have a professional politician. Those senators came and went, and if they were errant, you got rid of them. You didn't have any mavericks. You had people representing the state governments. And that's why it was supposed to be a slow, steady protector of the Constitution. Now, I think we go a step further. I suggest that the states pay their own senators' salaries and provide the benefits they deem appropriate. I think it's a good idea that each senator in D.C. gets a check signed by their governor and by the treasurer of their state, and they know who they're beholding to. No more of these, pay raises in D.C. And then, above all, return back to the Constitutional Congress, in which there was no pay and no benefits. I think that we give them the per diem the way the founders did it. So you give them a stipend each day to defray the cost of lodging and the cost of meals. And that's all you give them. That's all they have coming according to our founders. Okay, we keep the lights on. I don't know about paying their staffs. I don't even know if they had staff back then, but that's something for you all to do the research on. The South had it right. They decided to get rid of 2 terms and go to 1 6-year term for the presidency. I think they were right about that. The South was better than the North. I was born in the North. And you can call me Super Yankee because, Alaska's kind of north, isn't it? Okay. So we reduce the government to that level. We also have to go back to constitutional currency, which is real gold and silver. You do not need a reserve currency. You just return to honest money. When you have real store of wealth for your money, then you don't have to go to war and fight for these evil ones that are manipulating governments and countries and everything behind the scenes using our intelligence agencies, which are nothing more than traitors, as far as I can tell. I mean, the centralized police powers of the United States of America are being misused today and will continue to be misused until we dismantle those. The FBI it was argued at the time of the predecessor to the FBI was founded in 1913 that it was unconstitutional. We got sidetracked in a lot of ways by the evil ones. Once they took over our monetary system, they committed us to the world wars. We never would have had World War I if we had not had the Federal Reserve, if we hadn't allowed that beast to be created. America owes the entire world at this point. We've allowed our might to be cast abroad and misused. We've treated other people horribly. We've interfered in their governments. Look at the Ukraine. We took down a perfectly legitimate government in the Ukraine in 2014 or before then? And we caused this trouble. Look at Haiti. I think our military's I don't know if they're in there yet or not, but it will be like the 4th time. And the Haitians don't want to see us at all. Let's leave them alone. Let's honor their wishes and leave them to their own devices. I mean, I think that we could do some good things for them, but if they don't want us there, honor it. Let's stop meddling in the foreign affairs, in the affairs of others. Without an income tax, we need to return to tariffs and duties at the borders, which is what this nation ran on for most of its time in existence. So we go back to George Washington's tariffs and duties of 30%. Everything coming into the country has to be declared a value, and 30% goes into the Treasury before it comes in. By the way, Fort Sumter in the South was actually one place where duties and tariffs were collected. The war was about economics. And in case you're wondering, the South was better educated, and the per capita income in the South was much higher than in the North. And because of that, the federal government was getting almost all of its money from the South. $8 million of the $10 million annual budget was extracted from the South, and the South thought it was unfair. That's primarily why they seceded from the Union, was because 8 million out of 10 million, they didn't think it was very fair. Now, just to give you an example of the jealousy of the North, the highest paid state in the Union was Connecticut, with an annual income of, I believe, $713 per man on average, okay? Compare that to the richest state in the South, which was Mississippi. I know you don't believe me. Go look it up. Average income, more than $2,100 a man. 3 times. So if you want to have a republic, you have to empower the states again. The states have to be represented. And if you want to actually pull together as a nation, we need to return to what our founders gave us. Before we had professional politicians, before we had all this corruption and graft, before we had all these honeypot schemes, all this blackmail going on. So I'm talking about a strategic intervention. Gets right to the roots of a lot of things. Restore the original 13th Amendment, make all other amendments null and void, get rid of that IRS when you do that, because the 16th Amendment's gone, get rid of the direct election of senators by the people, which just makes them super congressmen, and go back to the state governments being represented by 2 of their own sent to Washington, D.C., subject to being recalled at any time by a vote of the state legislators. I think that'd be a good start. Now, on these tariffs and duties, we'll have to implement those slowly. But I think that we say no more most favored nation status for anybody. We have to treat the world equally. Everybody gets taxed at the same rate. Period. And I think that we take care of the phone technical support and the services provided on the internet by declaring that all of that is going to be tariff dutied, taxed at a rate of 30% as well. So whoever's providing that service has to declare the value of the service, and it must be a fair value. Certainly somebody can figure out how to determine what a fair value is. And they have to pay 30% of that into the national treasury. That takes care of that competition over the internet and over the phone lines and through other medium. So if you want to get rid of this one world government, if you want to stop these wars, these incessant wars and the manipulation that's going on, and if you want to stop the corruption, you go back to the original design that the founders gave us. All right. I was on Facebook a couple of years ago and somebody started touting this stuff. And I looked at him. I asked him, where did you get this from? And he said, he didn't remember. He got it somewhere. I said, well, you got it from me. I says, but don't worry. Just go with it. Steal it. Don't just borrow it. Steal it and run with it. So this is how we get our republic back if we are fortunate. We actually cut this federal government down. We end up with a balanced budget that's funded by the tariffs and duties coming in at our borders. and we level the playing field inside the country. You're not going to be taxed unfairly by a communist gradual income tax. You're not going to have that anymore. It won't be part of the government anymore. You're not going to have nonprofit organizations. Everybody will be equal. It'll be an equal playing field. You won't have one set of rules for the private guy that limits him and another set of rules for nonprofit government organizations and nonprofits and for companies. I think that we also do away with the corporations, especially the corporations, plural, known as the United States of America. I believe there are 4 of those. There might be more of those. Kind of a giant shell game which they've used to defraud us and steal everything from us. I think we also need to return to patented land. Patented land cannot be attached. It can't be, well, you can't borrow money against it because nobody can go after you on it. It can't be attached. It can't be taxed. That's what we originally had when we were a baby nation with 13 states. We had patented land, and that's the way it was supposed to be. That's one of those things that we inherited from ancient Israel, the real Israelites. Another thing is we had our state militias, and we had private militias. And the state militias often were written in the Constitution, and the age was age 20 for most of it, which is the age specified in ancient Israel by the Israelites. And just like they had plots of land that were supposed to stay in the family, redeemable within the family, and had to return to the family after so many years, that's the way it was supposed to be here in America. I wonder why that is. Go join me on my other channel, Awakening Israel. Read the Bible. Get a real education. You want to support me and my channel? You want to save our republic? Then use that link down below and go buy one of my Bibles. I want to sell 1 million of them. There's 50 or 70 million in the country today when you include the illegals. I think selling 1 million Bibles, nothing. Maybe it should be 3.7 million Bibles. Whatever it is, I'd like to see at least 5% of us reading Bibles on a daily basis. Why? Because then you're less likely to be deceived. It even says in the Bible, I'll send the great delusion. Not a great delusion, but the great delusion. And that's what churchianity is today. So join me in reclaiming the republic, reestablishing it the way our founders gave it to us. Kick out these professional politicians and get rid of these honeypot schemes and the bribes and the phony money and you call it inflation. I call it theft. May Yahweh, Creator, Father, Fad. Boy, am I screwing up my words this morning. May Yahweh bless you today and bless the Republic of the United States of America.